Welcome back to the show, Surf Splendor, episode number 509. Of course, my name is David Scales. As a way of an introduction to today's episode, I want to ask you, how many 50-year-old surf brands can you think of? Surfboard brands. And then among those, there's probably a dozen or so. Among those, how many of them are still innovating in their space? And that list is a lot shorter. But on that list is Timpone Surfboards. Jeff Timpone founded the company in 1980 in Huntington Beach as a surfboard shaper and builder. He'd been working for about 10 years prior to that with Russell Surfboards. And then in 9 years after starting the business in Huntington, he actually moved it to Haiku, Maui, where he's been ever since, building boards by hand. His son, Nic, has recently gotten involved in the business, and Nic has really helped modernize the business. He has taken over Instagram, and in fact, they have amassed 150,000 followers. They make incredibly slick board building videos, doing everything from start to finish, documenting it all and somehow cutting it down into like a 90-second little clip. They're incredible if you don't already follow them on Instagram at Timpone Surfboards. But the other thing, Nic's other major contribution, arguably more important, is his push towards sustainable board building materials. It's something that's near to Nic's heart. He actually studied it in college. But his father, Jeff Timpone, told me on this show 8 years ago or so, I had him on, and he told me that when we moved to Maui originally, the landfill in the middle of the island was just a hole in the ground, and now it's a mountain. And so sustainability is something that he is feeling very passionate about too. And so they were among the first surfboards that we've ever given away. We do these surfboard giveaways every month, just as a thank you to our supporters. You could sign up for $5 a month. It's at surfsplendorpodcast.com. The reason why they wanted to do a giveaway was in conjunction with Earth Day, which is in the month of April. It's actually coming up April 20th. And they were highlighting their sustainable board build. They call it Maui Leaf Lite. And in fact, there is a Maui Leaf Lite board right there behind me. That's the Gillespie model. It's a quad. This month, we are giving away a Timpone and Maui Leaf Lite construction. We're going to give away a pill model, which I also have and love. So Nic will tell you much more about that in today's episode. And I just wanted to acknowledge their efforts with that and also say thanks for constantly kind of being involved with me and helping me give away surfboards. So thank you to the Timpone family. Of course, all of this work and everything we do on Surf Splendor is supported by 3 industry partners: Rourke.com, RealWatersports.com, and Veyor Watches. Rourke.com, I wanted to showcase this. I've been wearing these shorts for 2 weeks straight. I wore them all through El Salvador. This is the layover traveler short. It's got the zip pockets. It's got this stash pocket for your cell phone back here, which is great for travel. The zips are great for travel too, so you can stash your passport, you can stash extra cash. It's got this little vent in the back. The material is super durable and great. Drawstring closure, similar to a board short. I'm a huge fan. I've got them in a bunch of different colors. In fact, I'm wearing the pants right now too. Can't really see those very well. Anyways, Rourke.com. Our promo code on Rourke is Splendor15. That'll save you 15% on any purchase. VeyorWatches.com/surf will also save you 15%. They sent a gift for Nic, which you'll see later in this episode. And then lastly, Real Watersports. I was in El Salvador last week showcasing the board bags that I got from Channel Islands. They just revamped their entire line of accessories, and you can get those at Real Watersports. They just got a big drop of inventory from Channel Islands. So if you want the new Channel Islands gear, board bags, board socks, day bags, travel bags with wheels, it's all available on realwatersports.com. I love this stuff. So go check that out. And then Nic Timpone he signed up for the listener trip that we did to El Salvador last week. And he was there. So we recorded this in person in El Salvador. Him traveling from Maui, me from Southern California. So without further ado, my name is David Scales for Surf Splendor. Thank you for listening. Enjoy this episode with Nic Timpone.
Surf Splendor.
Timpone, exactly.
Can we discuss your face?
Yeah, we sure can.
I didn't publish any photos or anything of it yet.
Me neither.
Let it kind of settle for a couple days.
Yeah.
But we can reveal it here.
Okay.
What happened?
I was struck by my surfboard.
Oh, shoot. Hold on.
Yep.
See, I told you. After all this time, I should know better.
Oh, you get the messages coming through on the computer?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Struck by your surfboard.
Yeah. Was struck by my surfboard. It's sort of a freak incident, I would say. It happened while duck diving. I didn't fall on a wave. I was duck diving. Well, first I caught a little wave because I wanted to move further down the line because I wanted to go in. I got a handful of really fun waves already that morning. And it was just time to go in. I was probably going to catch a later morning session. It was getting a little slow and the crowd was building, so I figured I would just catch an insider to kind of scoot my way down the line. I pulled out of the insider because it was just running off into the rocks. And sure enough, there was a set outside. No big deal, but it was starting to apex kind of right on top of me. And instead of, now I know, ditching my board, I duck dove, thinking it was all going to be okay, because it usually is. Get a little rattled, but there's kind of a little silt in the water here, and board just slipped out behind me, which has happened to me many times, and it's pretty sketchy when it does. The leash was limp, so I couldn't feel it pulling. I was kind of getting tossed by the wave and just bang right on the side of my face. I had a feeling I could feel it spinning around, and it kind of bumped me a couple times, that's why. And so I was trying to swim away with one hand and kind of trying to block another, and it just caught me really solid. Felt like a sucker punch, to be honest.
So it felt like blunt force.
Felt very...
It's like cheekbone, basically?
Yeah, right below the cheekbone.
Okay.
Yeah, and it felt very blunt force. I've been hit with my board several times in the face, and that definitely felt like a rail. I didn't really know what the extent was, except for I got hit, and then when I came up, I was just grab my board because I knew I got hit. Adrenaline starts to kick in because it was a really solid hit. Maybe I was a little dazed even, so breathe, and then I touched my face and I felt there was some opening on my face, and just caught my breath. And I think the first person I saw was Milo, and he was sort of like, "Oh shoot, you're bleeding." Another wave came, we duck dove it. Then I paddled over towards Toby, and Toby's like, "Oh, looks like you're bleeding." I got closer, and his eyes just grew. I was like, "Man, all right." He's like, "Yeah, you should go in. You're going to need stitches." And then luckily Daryl was out there. He's a retired doctor. He came over, gave it a look-see, pulled it open a little bit. And, they always make it seem like, "Oh, yeah, you got, some subdermal laceration and it'll be fine." And ultimately it is fine. But I was definitely a little rattled right after, but quickly just realized I should just make my way in because the water's a little iffy down here, and we did see some sharky activity early in the morning out there, so it was just probably better to go in, and I was on my way in anyways. Caught a wave in and made it to the beach before. I didn't get to see myself for probably like 20 minutes after it happened.
Yeah, it's a bit of a walk.
Yeah, but encountered a few people on the beach on the way up, and they all had similar shock reactions as Toby did, and so I knew it was like probably something I'm going to go need to see a doctor about, which is always a little like, you get a little like anxious being in a third world country and not quite knowing what this means for the rest of the surf trip.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got hit by my board pretty good, and it sliced me open.
Could you feel the flap when you duck dove?
I couldn't feel the flap, but I could feel the like water flushing through like a fresh feeling, like
Totally.
just when like something's exposed
Yeah.
that like you're not expecting. I could feel that.
Did you start to freak out mentally? How did you?
No, I think the moment of like it wasn't even quite a freak out, but just an acknowledgement of like underwater. Okay, you got hit really hard, so get up to the surface, like in case you, I don't know, black out or whatever. Then grab your board, breathe, make sure to breathe. A little bit, the adrenaline starts to kick in a little bit too, like when you get hit like that. Not quite disoriented, but Milo even said, he's like, you looked a little dazed, and I felt a little dazed. It was like, I don't know if you've ever been hit super hard in the face, but like there's like that moment where you're like, I don't know if I'm about to cry or if I should pass out, but it's almost like a overwhelming, maybe it's a little bit of the adrenaline too kicking in, like just a little like, oh, I feel uneasy and like, okay, like need to like breathe through it almost, but that only lasted probably 30 seconds. Then I started talking with people in the lineup and I knew, okay, I'm injured, but it's okay.
Good.
Yeah.
You handled it like a champ.
Thank you.
You did. And so my experience with all of that, I was in the lineup with you. I saw you catch that wave and you kicked out, and then the set was coming. And so I ignored you and just kind of focused on paddling out or duck diving or whatever. And then the set, I sat on my board after however many waves passed, and I just, for whatever reason, glanced back at you, and you were 20 feet away at least. And I could see blood coming from an open slit.
Yeah.
And to see blood that far away means it's a legit cut.
Yeah.
Especially when you just came up from the water where it would have got rinsed away. So I was like, oh, shoot, like, that's not good. And everybody's like, we saw him ride that wave. Like, he didn't wipe out or anything. So I thought what had happened was when I saw you kick out, you caught some air. And I thought maybe your leash extended or whatever, you landed on your board somehow from kicking out of the wave.
Yeah.
So I didn't even know it was a duck dive until later in the day. But you handled it really well because Daryl assessed you. You actually caught a wave, like you said, but you ripped a wave in with the open cut. So you ended up, I never saw you from that moment. You surfed past me and you were on the inside, and I turned to Daryl and I think Garrett, and I was like, do we need to go in with him? Like, how bad is it? And they're like, well, it's not good, but he'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, most people I would just go in with for moral support, but I was like, you know what you're doing. You don't seem rattled by it. And so that was, it was reassuring for everybody else who was traumatized by the sight of it. It was reassuring that it happened to you instead of somebody else.
For sure. And I think that was like, once you kind of like make the realization, like, it's okay. Like, it's not life-threatening.
Yeah.
Like, then you're just like, okay, let's just start the process of dealing with this. And getting through the shore break was a little interesting because then I was like paddling in by myself and I was like, okay, well, I really got to keep this out of the water as much as I can, but these waves are breaking on top of my head. And but made it to the beach. And it's funny, I was telling my wife this, I had been this whole trip taking the time after sessions to, when I come in on the beach, just sort of turn around and give a little thanks for whatever reason. Just thanks for this amazing experience and this life. And it was weird. I don't usually do that. That's why. But I had the peace of mind to do that. And so when I came in after the thing, I did the same thing, turned around, like, thanks for it not being worse. I'm standing on my feet. I'm not dizzy. It's, so I thought that was a little interesting in my own head. I always kind of, when after my mom passed away, I had spread her ashes sort of all over the island, had different spots where I like to go. And so I always kind of like thank her for maybe, keeping an eye on me and keeping me safe. But yeah, it sucks. But it also, like, once you get over the like initial, this sucks, like, could have been a lot worse.
Well, to explain the injury to listeners, maybe we will post a photo at some point, but it's pretty gory. It goes from the majority of your cheek, and it's, I'd say, at least 4 inches long, the main cut, and it's not quite through to the interior of the cheek. I don't know how many centimeters your cheek is thick.
Yeah.
What do you guess a cheek is in terms of thickness?
Centimeters. I'm bad with metrics.
Or millimeters?
I mean, so I'd probably go to guess that your cheek is close to maybe a little bit over a 1/2 inch thick.
And there is, I'd say it's cut through at least a quarter of an inch.
Yeah, exactly. At least a quarter of an inch.
It's like 7/10 of the way cut through.
Yeah, like Daryl said, it got into the fatty layer and
Yeah, you
maybe
could see
even just
fat.
underneath that. And so luckily it didn't go through to the inside of my cheek.
It's
And
close.
It's close. And actually the doctor said I'm really lucky that didn't crack my upper jaw or any of my teeth, because he says that's very common with a impact to that area of the face, because it's not quite on the orbital, it's just below. And so I got lucky.
So the main gash goes that distance of 4 inches and it's that deep. And then there's another little gash below that, more by the lip.
Yeah.
There's some bruising.
Yeah.
There's also apparently tendon or nerves in your face. So you could suffer paralysis if you sever one of those nerves. So you didn't do that.
I know.
There's a lot of lucky.
Yeah. A lot of
portions of
lucky
this.
and trying to just focus on that instead of the, boom, I can't surf anymore. Or
yeah.
my face is going to be disfigured. It's like, got away with being fairly unscathed.
Well, we still don't know what part of the board hit you. What's your best guess?
I would guess, I've been hit with my board before, that's why, and it felt like the rail of the board. That was why, when I got hit, the first thought wasn't, I'm cut, because it didn't feel like a sharp incision. It felt like a blunt impact. So I figured it was the rail of the board.
Yeah.
But then when I realized I had a slit, I was sort of like, dang, like it must have been the fin, because what else could cut you like that? But on further review and examination of my board, and just like feeling the impact and rewind in my head, knowing automatically that it felt like a rail, it didn't feel like a single, it was a broad area. I think it was the tail end of my board. I glass the boards, so I know that they're strong back there, and I like a sharp edge in the back, and so I think with enough pressure, it was just enough to pop the skin right open, probably.
Yeah.
I'll have to recheck my board. My boards are packed, and I don't want to unpack them, so I'll have to recheck the tail of my board. I kind of did on the beach a quick assessment, because I'm like, man, what was that? And I didn't see anything, but I'll have to look again, but I'm pretty sure it was the edge of the tail.
Random.
Yeah, super random. Yeah, didn't even happen surfing, just duck diving.
Dude, today, second session today, I duck dove. I was already exhausted and kind of ready to go in, but I duck dove a wave and my board got ripped out of my hands. I had duck dove like 10 waves.
Yeah.
So I was just exhausted. My grip wasn't great. And you're right, that silt gets between your hands. And I was tired, 10 duck dives. On the 11th duck dive, board got ripped out of my hands. And I was just like, I'm turning around and going in after this. Like, just knowing what happened to you, I'm like, I am so not prepared. I'm like, I'm not on my A game right now. Time to go in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm always amazed how much you can continue to learn through surfing. And something I always see the pros doing that I never fully understood, because I'm like, well, if you could duck dive a wave, why don't you just duck dive it? But you see guys, especially on the broadcasts and especially on the North Shore, where it's not even that big of a wave. It's a 3-foot wave, but they know it's dumping right in front of them, and they just get off their board and swim under.
I know. I've seen that.
Whereas that would have been for sure been the smarter move, is to just like, why risk it? I know this wave is apexing right on top of me, even though it wasn't a super big wave. I've gone under bigger waves than that. Just having that happen was like, okay, from now on, like if I'm just in the impact zone, just get off the board and swim. You always get under the wave and out the back faster.
Yeah.
When you're off your board.
Presuming nobody's around.
Exactly. No one's
PSA.
inside of you. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I never understood why they took that option either. I always figured duck diving's the better option, but now I know.
Yeah, and one of those things you probably just learn from being in the water years and years and being in those situations over and over and over again.
I learned from you.
And now, yeah, exactly. And so now I'm going to make that mental note and add that to my repertoire of maneuvers.
Good to know. Thank you. And everybody listening, good to know. So what happened You obviously, I know, you had to drive 3 hours, go to the hospital.
Yeah, so one of our fixers here, Francisco, luckily the beauty of being in a kind of a smaller, underdeveloped country is like people have all these community connections. And so he was on the phone right away with his sister, who works in the hospital with the plastic surgeon in the hospital. And so we were able to get like firsthand confirmation that, yeah, come on through to San Salvador. It's like a 3-hour ride, 3.5 hours yesterday, probably with all the traffic. But we'll receive you. And I was really impressed. We got in there. There wasn't a big line. We went into the emergency room. There wasn't a big line of people. Signed a couple things, showed my ID, and within 5 minutes of walking in the door, I was getting numbing agent in the side of my face by the plastic surgeon, and he was putting in the internal sutures. That took maybe 10 minutes in total. He cleaned it up for sure after it was numb, quite vigorously. It was kind of sore because the cheekbone's a little sore, but I could feel he was really wiping the cut out, which was fine. But and then he actually glued I thought the stitches were going to be on the surface. I didn't understand what the procedure was, but then he glued the surface and the rest of the cuts, and so it's a pretty, like, there's no stitches on the outside, and it looks pretty small compared to how it looked filleted open yesterday.
It honestly looks like it's healed for weeks almost.
Yeah, and the swelling's gone down today a lot, and so it's like not even an impact. And my talking is obviously fine. I'm eating okay, and just, yeah, lucky.
It's crazy.
Yeah, super crazy.
The photo of yesterday morning open cut versus yesterday afternoon cleaned up, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like night and day.
Yeah, it's pretty
congrats.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Factormeals.com/surf50. Let me tell you, Factor Meals has filled a specific gap in our lives that has simplified our busy schedules and satisfied and nourished us. If you follow me on social media, you know that I love to cook. My wife and I love food and wine, but there are still at least 5 meals a week where we're just underprepared, short on time, and don't want to make a bad dietary decision, nor sacrifice the pleasure that we get out of dining. Factor has solved it. Chef-prepared meals that are delivered to your house weekly. They take 2 minutes to heat up, and they're designed to be eaten anywhere. There's no prep, no cooking, and you can recycle the package that it comes in. Delicious meals that are good for you with over 35 options to choose from each week. Go to factormeals.com/surf50. Less expensive than dining out, more delicious, more nutritious. Factormeals.com/surf50. Well, we're here to give away a surfboard, which is pretty fun. But before we get there, how did you find the podcast? You've been supporting the podcast as a, quote, supporter for a long time, from the earliest of days that I can remember.
Yeah, and I was also trying to remember how I found the podcast. It's almost like annoying me how I can't find out how I found it. I must have seen maybe some of your early Instagram posts.
Okay.
Surf Splendor, possibly. I mean, it would have had to have been. And I was kind of a late adopter to podcasts, but in the last 5 or 6 or even 7 years, pre-pandemic, I was getting pretty heavily into them as I was doing more and more work at the shop, working by myself. I like to occupy my time by hearing people's stories. You know, I like all the different, obviously, like Joe Rogan's fun to listen to, some of the episodes, but also This American Life. I listen to some different economic podcasts and just stories. I like storytelling and human experience. And so if something was surfing, I was like, this is right up my alley. And then you were doing some of the first like interviews with people who you wouldn't see get the magazine interview. And so I thought that was super intriguing. And just knowing that there was a community of like-minded folk like myself who are passionate about surfing and surfboards and the industry and the community that surrounds that I was sucked right in and enjoy, you know, spit obviously and the grit and yeah, I can't remember where I found it. It must have been on Instagram though.
Do you remember one of the first episodes you heard? Like among the first interviews? Just so I could try to pinpoint the time or the year.
Some of the first ones. Frick, I can't.
If you can't, that's
I can't. I keep thinking back, you know, Billy Hamilton wasn't that long ago. That's why I had been listening for a couple years even before that. That's why.
Well, I mean, I remember, I think when my family and I came to Maui and we had dinner with you guys, that was maybe 2018, 2017.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and you had been listening for years, I think, before that.
Yeah.
So it must have been at least, I don't know.
Yeah. If I went through the catalog of your podcasts, and I would probably be able to be like, I remember this one, I remember this one, I remember this one. I don't remember this one. Then that would maybe be the breaking point.
So the only other way I was thinking you might have found it other than the Instagram was in the earliest days when I knew nobody knew what a podcast was and I didn't know how to advertise it. I had a deal with Surfer magazine where I would transcribe the interviews and I would send it to them as an interview. Like, hey, can you just run this interview? And then in somewhere maybe at the bottom of it, you can say, you know, transcribed from Surf Splendor Podcast or something like that. So they would get a free interview out of it and I would get the exposure.
That's very possible, actually, because I was a voracious consumer of magazines while they were still around. So that's a big possibility, because I also was late to Instagram. I was never into social media until I started realizing like what a connector it was.
Yeah.
So it could have been from the magazine, maybe a transcribed interview.
Yeah.
Either that or somewhere on the internet.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who else. As far as I knew in my group, I was the first one to start to find the podcast. And so I don't think anyone would have suggested it to me.
Well, my awareness of your brand is, of course, your dad. Earliest days of surf magazines, I'd rush Randall doing backflips somewhere on Maui with that Timpone logo on the board. That was my earliest memory.
Yeah,
So
the big logo too.
Yeah, exactly. Mid-90s. He was the only guy doing flips.
Yeah.
So I've known you guys since mid-90s, I would say.
That's cool.
Yeah. How's your dad doing?
He's doing very well. Not a lot of people know because we didn't like advertise it a lot, but he was in a pretty gnarly single vehicle accident. He flipped his truck a few times, totaled the vehicle, but somehow the only injury he received was a laceration to the forearm, which did sever all the muscles down to the bone, but it didn't cut the tendons. It hit the most muscly part of the forearm, and so that's very repairable. So a couple days, that was like 2 months ago, and so a couple days after the incident, he was right into surgery, and now he's in the rehab process. But within 3 weeks after the incident, because he had no other injuries, days later he was back in the office, but then weeks later he was back in the shaping room because he can't stop, and he doesn't know anything else. Yeah. You know, it's strange, but he also got very lucky. Yeah,
definitely. But that work ethic, or that just not being able to relax and calm, is such an old school mentality.
Such an old school of that generation. Yeah, just sort of like the bumps and bruises, like, yeah, that's part of the deal, you know, like I'm just going to keep pressing forward while my feet still move, you know?
Exactly. I'm glad he at least went to the doctor.
Yeah.
A lot of dudes would have been like,
for
I
sure.
don't need a doctor.
No, totally. He might have not, except for the ambulance gave him a ride. So.
Good. How's biz at Timpone Surfboards?
It's really, it's good for our scale. You know, with my dad's injury, it's been, it's put a little hiccup in the production, but he's almost back to full steam, even though he's still doing hand therapy. You know, pre the accident, obviously COVID was just a boom for everyone in the hard goods, and we were just rocked with work. So it was feast. You know, I mean, we had like, it was like a 6-month wait for us, and it's just me and my dad working. And so that was cool, but also slightly overwhelming. And I realized pretty quickly that we could only hit a certain speed to finish the boards. You know, our laminating room is fairly small. We have 3 racks. We have 1 sanding room. He's shaping all the boards by hand. And so it's been really cool to see that with me stepping in and helping with some like exposure. Like, my dad never advertised forever. It was just word of mouth because it worked. But when I stepped in, I created an Instagram account. I didn't even have my own personal social media account. I did it just to get the business out there, because I was like, oh, seems like the thing where people are showing the world, you know? Like, we didn't have a good website. He had a super outdated website forever. We made a new website, and which is now kind of outdated, but but honestly, a lot of the interactions are happening on social media, Instagram mostly, and it's been really cool to see the growth and value of that. Not only to get more customers, but connecting with old customers. We have so many people contact us like, you made me this board in 1982. It had, you know, channels and 4 fins and blah, 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 glass on, this, that. And so that's been fun for my dad too, to kind of like get some reminders that like he's still relevant and people remember him and appreciate him. Without contact to the outside world, you can end up in your own little silo, which when you get in your own head too much can sometimes be unhealthy. So that's been good. And business has been just chugging along. It's been very interesting also because at one point, it was about just pre-COVID, being on Maui. It's such a tight board building community in the sense that it's highly competitive in a small area. And for the most part, a lot of people are competing for the clear sanded finish thruster shortboard, which we're happy to compete in, but we have so much more to offer. My dad's experience and knowledge through the years, he's started shaping I think he shaped his first board in 1968. And so he's been through and he lived, you know, he was a surfer before that. So he lived from the longboard into the shortboard revolution and into the 80s where things got real weird with like the real small wide twin fins, and then to the potato chip thruster, into performance longboards, and then tow boards, and back to big wave guns. And then on Maui, you have the explosion of all the like water wind sports. So there was foil boarding, there's kite surfing, stand-up paddling, what else? Just all those kind of mixed sports. So being able to offer something slightly different than just the high performance thruster, we decided that's our space to shine. And we started just drifting away. We wanted to differentiate ourselves from the rest of the market. And I think we did that along with providing alternative designs, alternative materials and construction, which is where, you know, I was in school, a little like, I don't want to say lost, but kind of not sure where I was going with it, and ended up in the Sustainable Science Management bachelor's program.
Where?
So I started, it was MCC, Maui Community College. In 2011, it got incorporated into the UH system. So now it's University of Hawaii Maui campus. And there were 2 bachelor's degrees, one in Applied Business and Information Technology, and then the other one SSM, which was a Sustainable Science Management program. Previous to that, I was taking a lot of agriculture classes. Right out of high school, I did a lot of I was on construction sites. I was doing a lot of landscaping. I really like the horticulture of the native plants. And so I was really into agriculture and greenhouse nursery management, pest management, all these different irrigation, all these different things. And so out of the two choices for the bachelor's degrees, the sustainable science management seems like it offered a little more interest for what my life was already kind of geared towards, also living on an island, caring a lot for the environment and the people. So I went down that route and graduated with that. But before I graduated, I started, we would have school projects, and I started like thinking up like, what could I do? Just a make-believe project. One of them was a fully sustainable boat for the Mentawais. It was solar powered. It was kind of like, it was fantasy. It wasn't all like practical at the time, but it was just how far could we take this idea? It's like farming local islands to get the like vegetables and stuff on board instead of having to import a bunch of stuff, which is impractical in reality, but it was a fun project. And then in one of I think it was my entrepreneurial class, I was like, well, I have a great idea because my dad has this surfboard business, which I wasn't super involved in. I was around the shop, I was around the boards, around him, around the people that were there, but I wasn't hands-on yet with any of the materials or any of the tools. I was like, well, this is interesting. I can kind of do this as a case study. I can get real information as far as sales, as far as costs and stuff. And so I started plugging it into these different projects. And at some point, I stumbled across the Sustainable Surf Organization. And I was like, oh, this is cool. There's a third party that verifies people who are taking extra steps to make a more environmentally and socially responsible product. Again, I played with different projects. So like boards made of coconut or mushrooms, things that don't exist yet, just trying to take it to the nth degree to see what would be, applicable and how fun it would be. So mixing sort of the entrepreneurial and business classes with the idea of sustainability, as Sustainable Surf outlined it, I was like, man, like there's opportunity to go even further than this, but the materials are limiting at this point. But I also saw that we could incorporate some version of this into my dad's business. And so we started tracking down the blanks. At that point, it was Marco's recycled or partially recycled foam. There was Entropy Resins, had one of the, just the crudest formulas at the time. And it was, hey, those two things, right, they're better, let's say, right? Like they did some carbon life cycle analysis, I think Entropy Resins did, and there was a significant carbon footprint reduction. And so I was like, oh, this is, it's not perfect, but it's a better choice. How much further can we go? What are the alternatives to other inputs like fiberglass? So we were looking into reinforcements. Hemp has been around for a really long time. Flax has been around for a long time. How can we incorporate these? We can substitute these materials for fiberglass. It was kind of a slow roll to get that up and going, but the first board we made was in 2015, so right before I graduated, and I actually have that same board on this trip, and it's to this day one of my favorite boards. It's been all kinds of different surf trips down on the boat in Indonesia to Nicaragua and El Salvador, and I surf it at home as much as I can. So that's pretty cool to kind of have like a living testament of the different materials. And yeah, I kind of got lost in my own thought there.
I've got a few questions. Was there a reason why you weren't working in your dad's business straight out of high school?
Yeah. I've also asked myself that question, and I've also asked him that. And it's kind of, there's two parts. It wasn't quite an open door, like, come on in, kiddo thing. And I don't know if he was doing it because that was his deal and he didn't expect me to just fold in like that. Or if he maybe in some weird way was kind of like protecting me and like hoping I wouldn't go into that. Because like I said, he's worked, I've seen him just my entire life. He works 7 days a week, works super hard, deals with a lot of BS from all kinds of different personalities, from customers to competitors in the marketplace. And so maybe it was his way of kind of like hoping, he didn't want to pigeonhole me into surfboards. And then I wasn't, for whatever reason, I wasn't terribly interested in it. I think I probably was taking it for granted a bit. Like, my dad builds surfboards. Like, that's great. I'll always be able to get surfboards without thinking, super far ahead, obviously. But it wasn't really until right before I graduated that I was like, this makes sense that I should be not only in an established family business, but I should bring some of my fresh ideas and perspective to this business that's honestly, and this marketplace, the Maui board building scene, that's gotten a bit stale. And so it was just culmination, and it was a slow trickle into the business. I didn't actually dive headfirst, 5 to 6 days a week until COVID. So before that, I was like 3 to 4 days a week at the shop. And then I had a couple property management gigs that would help supplement the income. But once COVID happened, it was my property management gig dried up. They were cutting back on all kinds, lawn service, all kinds of different maintenance. And surfboards really took off. And so that was when it was just all hands on deck and a crash course in learning how to build boards. And to my dad's credit, he gave me a lot of autonomy. He showed me how to do it, but he also let me figure out my own way, what was comfortable for me. And I still use a lot of the techniques that he's shown me, but I've gleaned tons of techniques from other people in the industry, like on Maui mostly.
What's your role at Timpone, and who taught you the techniques that you're talking about?
Okay, so role at Timpone is I do pretty much everything after after shaping. So I'll do all the glassing, which epoxy is a big part of that. So I do polyester and epoxy. I sand all the boards. I install the fins, after glass fin boxes. I've been getting into pin lines. I let my dad do the polishing, because polishing is one of the hardest jobs actually to do and get good. And I think he likes the break from shaping. My thought was, if I take over the rest of it, then he can focus on shaping. But I think he enjoys mixing it up a little bit. And we do a fair amount of polished finished boards, but nothing like that's going to like take him away from shaping. So on top of all the board work I do, I've taken it upon myself to get a relevant website up, really start getting active on the socials, which is mostly Instagram at this point, but you can link Facebook, and pretty much just focused on Instagram. And so taking over kind of the outreach, anything, I reached out to you. That was kind of how we got connected. I saw an opportunity. I recognized that podcasts were kind of a new platform. And that was when I was like, hey, like, do you do board giveaways? And if I'm not mistaken, we did the first 3 board giveaways from the podcast with you. So anything outward facing, I'm happy to take on and try to make a language to it and tell people what it's all about, which can be a lot. I also film a lot while I'm working, which is also super difficult at times, but I've gotten into a little bit of a flow and I've figured out kind of how I can do it. And I don't need to have someone else in there following me around. It's just me and my tripod and my phone, and I can just make it happen. And
you've done a phenomenal job with that. I've told you this, but it's like, it is so slick now, the board building edits. The internet loves them. You're doing among the best jobs at it that I could think of. How many Instagram followers do you have now?
My dad actually just texted me this trip. We just hit 150,000.
Insane.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I'm trying to just like not, be super like excited about it, because from the beginning, before I had social media, I always thought it was very superstitious. or
Superficial.
superficial rather. Thank you. Very like just almost like cringy surface level. But I'm seeing the value of it more and more. But I'm also not, we have 150,000 followers. Like, doesn't necessarily equate to a ton of board orders, but it does give some notoriety. And what I've now kind of realized that I am shifting towards is just bringing awareness to the amount of work and skill that is involved in building a board, to try honestly for everyone in the board building world to boost up the value of it all, because there is a lot of work that goes into it. And everything from the people who the big top 5 of the manufacturers, they have guys working with them that will never get their shine, but they are incredibly skilled craftsmen that are doing what I do every single day, but production style, which is almost harder than what I do. I can kind of take my time because we do a lot of custom order color work. None of them are really like, we can do rush jobs, but it's not high production like we're doing 10 boards a day. And so just trying to really elevate the craft of it all. I think that's been overlooked for a long time, and the spotlight has been, not unfairly, but it's been stolen by the surfer's performance, which in my opinion, if you're a great surfer, you can rip on pretty much any board. So like, to hold up the value of a board based on a surfer is just, it doesn't make sense to me. I'd rather show people what's involved. I'd rather give people a firsthand experience of not only the time, but like the mistakes, and the skill that you can only get by repetition, by time and experience. That's nothing you can pay for. You have to put in the hard yards. You have to mess up a lot before you get it right. And it's been super rewarding, actually. And now I'm really excited about it. I'm excited when I know, now me and my dad are communicating a lot more. Okay, what's coming up? What order is coming up? Okay, that'll be a good one to document. And so be able to pick and choose, and I can really kind of organize it a little bit more, the documentation. I do not only hope to, but we are going to be producing more long form content in board building. It's just not ready to expose to everyone just yet. Yeah.
Right. Rocketmoney.com/surf. Just this week, my wife figured out she was paying a subscription for Showtime, but then also paying for Paramount Plus, which includes Showtime for free. That's precisely what Rocket Money was designed for. A modern tool that meticulously tracks the details that we easily get distracted from. It's a finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your monthly spending, and helps you lower your bills. It gives you freedom by helping you see your subscriptions in a simple dashboard and alerts you about hidden fees or increases. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has helped save its members an average of $720 a year, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions. Stop wasting money on things that you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/surf. Calm the clutter in your head, simplify the tedium of your financial life, and find freedom through rocketmoney.com/surf. Was there a reason why you picked laminating?
No, I think it was just, I could see that it was obviously a part of the build that requires a lot of skill. And I like to, if I get into something, I like to get good at it. I like to be very knowledgeable of all the different things. And I think there was a lot of opportunity in there in the laminating area to, not that my dad wasn't doing a good job. So before me, he was doing all the steps by himself.
Insane.
For years. And I was just baffled. And that was how he was able to make his our lifestyle. He raised 2 kids. He bought a house in Hawaii. And so he was able to pull it off by just sheer knuckle-headed hard work. And so I thought, at the very least, I can help him take some stuff off of his plate. essentially. I started with epoxy because it's the most user-friendly probably, and some people would probably have a different perspective. It gave me more time, especially learning. We weren't making practice boards. It was, this is a customer's board, so let's do light catalyzation to start so we can make sure we get it finished before the resin kicks. So really learning on the fly, doing the epoxy was really good because I got to get my steps, my stages in the process down, and then take that over to polyester, and you know what steps you go through to then, to wrap it all up, and you're not lost. Sort of like organization is key in laminating.
But was there anybody else who you were able to lean on for mentorship other than your father?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, because of my dad, he's so well respected and have such good friends that are also in the industry that there are people that would pay money to learn from that are offering me advice and tips. And a lot of them don't even exist on social media because they're of that old school generation. And because I was my dad's son, I was able to sit on that stool in the corner of the room and observe. Board building's always been kind of a closed door industry, and I think it still is, which I love because it's still a little gritty, but I think that it's important to show people, not only to show people what goes into it, but also like a lot of these people that have that mentality have been building boards from the early days. If they don't pass their skill on and their knowledge on, where's it going to go? It's going to be lost. So I lean on, I've never asked point blank necessarily, but people have offered advice when they see me doing something. They're like, oh, you might want to try it like this because it's better, and like, just trust me, like this will work a little bit better, if you work on the technique. And I got the chance to work with, after my dad showed me how to sand, how to glass, how to install the fins, all that stuff. But I also got to work with, right next door to us is a great glass shop. Dave Gott is his name, Gott Glassing, Wig Surfboards on Instagram. And he built boards for Rich Harbor in California back in the day. And he's an incredible glasser. He can do amazing color work and then also pump out production style clears. I mean, and colors for that matter. He's doing, like eight sides a day, at least color, big, 10-foot long boards, beautiful color work, inlays, all that stuff. And so I got the chance to work with him. Also during the COVID boom, he could use an extra hand. And so I was doing a lot of clear polys for him, but that meant I was in the laminating room with him. And so I was able to observe, and then he was like, I want my boards like this. This is how I do it. And so I was able to learn kind of just by osmosis and to meet his criteria. So Dave Gott has been a great tool, or not tool, but a resource.
Yeah. A
great resource to learn tips and tricks. I mean, really the list could go on. I see stuff, some of the OG guys, Thomas De La Pina, who used to work for my dad. He glasses for Kazuma Surfboards. He doesn't have his own Instagram, but he's absolutely a master at what he's done. He's done it for a long time. I get people offered me advice or give me insights with different, with epoxy specific stuff. And Sean Ordonez from SOS Shapes, he's always very like open to, giving me little techniques and things he does, and just not like do it like this, but hey, like I did this and I find it works really well, and just little things like that. This guy, Jaybird on Instagram, I can't even think of his last name, which is a little sad because I've known him for a really long time. He's been around Maui for a long time. He's a great glasser. He'll give me advice if I need, or tune me into something if I'm overlooking it. There's like I said, the list could kind of go on and on, especially with the connections on Instagram. And I'm never really asking point blank. It's just observing a lot and then maybe they see me and they're like, this guy's trying, so like, here's a heads up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about introducing more sustainable board building materials into the line at Timpone, what was customer response to that stuff?
At first, it was really experimental and kind of just for myself, because I was coming out of the sustainable science management program. I was quite indoctrinated with the impact we're having on our earth, and how it can adversely affect communities of lesser economic means, especially. And so it was like, I want my boards like this from now on. But before that, after Clark Foam closed, I went straight to styro epoxy because we were getting the big blocks of foam, and me and my dad were hot wiring the rocker blanks at home. And so I got just totally mesmerized with the epoxy and the styro feel, light, super responsive. And so I was already on that page, and the fact that then you could just substitute the aluzine or the other versions of epoxy with a more plant-based or bio-based resin, it's like, that seems easy enough. Okay, we can substitute virgin EPS, expanded polystyrene foam, with partially recycled. That's easy enough. And so we were sourcing these materials ourselves. There was no relationship between our main supplier on island with the producers of these products. So it was super costly to bring these things to Maui. So the price point was high, and this was 2016. And so it was hard to convince people that an $850 board was the better choice when, even though that wasn't terribly long ago, 2016, boards were still in the $550 to $600 range, which they're really not that much higher now, but it was a leap.
It was a 50% increase.
Yeah, exactly. It was a 50% increase. But it was funny because I was really laying on thick the virtues of biological or ecological sustainability. And that really resonates with some people, for sure. And so the earliest customers were people that really appreciated that we were just taking the steps to try to make a better product. And then from there, I think it's been a combination of that, and also people really enjoy the performance of the EPS and the epoxy. That's really, I think, come a long way, and you'd probably agree, in the industry, it's taken a chunk of the PU market. So it was a combination of having a unique build, and then also like people loving the way the equipment feels. So it was slow to market to start, for sure. And we took a lot of hits financially just to get them out there, because we believed that this was part of our plan of differentiating ourselves from the rest of the crowd on Maui, and for that case in the state, and then in the United States and in the world. And so we felt like it was a unique angle to take. And now it's like 40% of our boards are all now Maui Leaf Light Construction, which is our EPS epoxy.
Which was smart to brand it as its own construction, Maui Leaf Light.
Yeah.
And also, it just makes sense that it would be done on Maui. Like the idea that the sustainable board option comes from Maui for some reason just feels right. And so branding it with the name Maui in it is also very good, smart, and I could see there being worldwide demand for that exact product.
Yeah, and I think all what you just said helped raise it to where it's at now, where it's not even seen as like obscure. It's a viable option, especially because we worked really hard with the manufacturers of the material to get into our suppliers' orbit, which helps cut down shipping costs, helps increase availability, and just made it more convenient and streamlined to make that possible.
Yeah.
There's certain materials that we still are ordering direct because they're a little obscure. Our hemp fabric we order from a company in Colorado, actually, who's been waving the hemp flag since like the 80s, which is really cool. And now I have a personal relationship with the daughter of the founder of the company, Enviro Textiles, I think is the actual name. Really cool people. They provide a great product, but so working directly with them helps. Getting in touch with different people like Cole in Australia, they produce a lot of reinforcements for marine applications, and I don't know if they've added a branch for surfboards, but now they've specialized in some really unique surfboard materials. So working closely with them, we developed a few proprietary, custom materials.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the origin of the material obviously is part of the sustainability. Hemp is more sustainable, let's say, or comes from a sustainable source or renewable source.
Yeah.
The other detail with sustainable surfboards is longevity, durability, basically.
Yes.
I have 2 Maui Lite constructed boards. They're both in excellent condition, and the older one is 6 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And I've ridden it a ton, and it's still in incredible shape.
And that's the pill?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Cool. Yeah.
So
that's rad. No, and that's just testament to, that's the other misconception I think with epoxy builds is that they're light and fragile, but you don't have to make them ultra light if you want them to last. You just kind of give them like a normal lamination schedule, and the properties of epoxy allow it to just have a lot more longevity. And that's something we've been trying to tell people, because most people are convinced, they don't like EPS and epoxy because they had an experience on a board that just felt too fragile or too sensitive or whatever. And we're just like, you don't have to have it ultra light. You can have it the same weight as a PU, but you're still going to get all the benefits of the materials. So that's also helps, get people over that line and to get their first Maui Leaf Light.
And the other feedback or concern that people have is that they don't like the chattery aspect of EPS, but you can dampen that, right?
Yeah, you can dampen that. And I've also, I've listened to all of your podcasts, and so I've heard, you've brought things up, and Scott, I think rightfully so, says it like it is. And we're not trying to make an EPS board like a PU board. That's not what we're trying to do. But the option to dampen is there, given these different materials, the flax and the hemp specifically. And so we're not like, we want to just make something as good as a PU. We want to make a better product, and it can have properties that people like of a PU.
Right.
Yeah.
So depending on how the customer expresses what they want out of the board, you can kind of cater the layup or lamination to that.
Exactly. And honestly, we haven't had a ton of people shy away from it because they don't like the feel of it. Most people are honestly stoked on it.
Yeah.
And they don't mention a thing about how it feels compared to a PU. They're just happy that it's an alternative, not only build, but like an alternative product just in general, because we do custom one-offs essentially. We're not we're working on putting together models, which is a little silly because that's a little late to the game. 50 years after my dad started shaping, having models, but it's just they're all unique one-offs, and so it's just another unique add-on.
But you're right, and I want to reiterate it. It isn't an alternative. It's not just an alternative construction. It's an improvement upon construction. It's an improved construction.
That's what we're trying to do. Yeah, exactly.
Totally. It is. What model are we giving away?
We're giving away a pill.
Yeah, I think that's a great choice.
Yeah, I was waffling a little bit back and forth on the pill or the Gillespie. I think the pill is just an easygoing all-around board. You can have the 5-fin option if you want. Some people prefer thrusters over quads. I personally ride mine as a quad only. I have a center box. I've never put a fin in it. And I love the board. It's, I call it an alternative groveler just because that's essentially what it is. It's not the short board squashed down a few inches, widened like a traditional groveler. It's got a almost almond shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I like the rounded thumb point tail. I think it provides a lot of hold and maneuverability, but also keeping the tail block wide, and so it's real skatey. And then, I ride mine 5'8". I ride my high performance thruster at 5'10" or 5'11", so a couple inches down. I ride my shortboard at 2 3/8, and the pill is 2.5, and it's in the, just under 20 inches wide probably. So it's really kind of like a fishy without being a fish feeling. And I've ridden that, like I said, I've taken that all over the world, and I've ridden it in supercritical waves in Indonesia. And I think having the thumb tail or the like rounded pin, it really just gives a little extra security, if not in reality, in your mind, that you're going to be able to hold in sections. And then having it as a quad fin, I think a lot of people understand quads are good for, going fast down the line. But with that wider tail block, it allows you to release really effortlessly. And
Sweet. So we'll do a pill model built to spec for the customer's own build and needs.
Exactly.
Built out of Maui leaf light construction.
Exactly. And there's a couple different versions of the construction, depends on how many bells and whistles they want. So we'll discuss that with the winner,
Sweet.
Yeah, the standard Maui leaf light build is, well, could I touch just real quick on why EPS over PU when we're talking about the potential for sustainability? There's potential for sustainability in EPS because it is recyclable. I'm going to get his name wrong, but Ellison?
Oh, yeah. Ellis Erickson.
Ellis Erickson. Love what he does. And he does all of his stuff out of EPS. I was reading an article about it because of that. Because while it's not necessarily sustainable in itself, it has the most potential to be. And so that's why the EPS over PU. And then I think there's a company in Europe that's working on maybe a plant-based or recycled polyester resin, but right now epoxy seems to be the one resin you can get derived from plant matter. So it's about these incremental steps, like if it's only 1 or 2% better, it's still 1 or 2% better. And
if you support it, we get to 5% better.
Exactly. It gains traction and so on and so forth. So sorry for that little deviation. I digress. Yeah. The standard build is EPS core, a somewhat normal epoxy layup on the bottom, but we do a hemp inlay on the deck, and that's a sandwich lamination. It's not proprietary, but I'm not going to spell it out for people. You can figure it out. And by that, we're able to reduce the use of fiberglass and just utilize these alternative materials. And I think the more and more you're able to utilize alternative materials, it gets into people's psyche, and it becomes just a more, it's not such a foreign thought.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. How has your dad's business improved since you've been involved? I mean, I guess it's hard to tease apart your involvement from COVID itself, but how many boards was he building prior to your involvement, and how many have you unlocked with your involvement?
I think, so the COVID bubble popped, I think last summer,
okay.
Right? Or right before last summer. So about May of last year, things really were winding down. We were finally getting caught up to speed. We don't admittedly have an incredible turnaround time, especially when we have 25 or 30 orders locked in. We tell people it's going to be 5 to 6 weeks. We'll tell them that, try to get it done in 4 or under to look like heroes. But I think my involvement has just freed up my dad to focus on shaping. He's going to be 75 this year. As he admits, he's not moving like he used to. And so just to be able to focus on building the best shapes he can and designing the best boards. I think what I've really brought to the table is we've been able to increase the quality because I, in turn, can take the time to do a really good job in the lamination and sanding. Our turnaround time, I think, has been faster. Though there's two of us instead of one of us. That just makes sense. And I think it's just grown our exposure, me getting involved with outreach on the internet through social media or whatever else. Being involved with sustainable surf for a long time has provided us a extra little feather in our cap. They really appreciate what we do. Increase in value. Again, I come back to kind of just bringing awareness to what it takes, to build quality surfboards. And I say quality surfboards like I mean it. My dad's as real as it gets. He's been hand shaping through many different eras. And I think he builds the most refined shapes that I see. We see a lot of different boards. We work right next to a ding repair shop. We see a lot of different boards in there from all over the world. Sure, we're biased, but with the implementation of the shaping machine and having that be so ubiquitous, it's sort of homogenized the design of boards, especially in the rails and outlines. Those computer programs, I'm sure they can be tuned up. I'm sure you can be a wizard at the computer program and make a very unique product, but the way that computer program draws lines, it's drawing lines the same in all the different shapes. So we've just seen a homogeneity of the boards, and we take a lot of pride in what we do with the refinement. And I give a lot of that credit to my dad's shaping experience, and just living through the different eras and being a great surfer himself. Like I said, he's 75, so he's pretty much relegated to a longboard these days, but he still gets out there and goes. He feels boards. He's trying new fins, he's trying new designs. And so just really putting quality behind the product.
Yeah. How has it affected your guys' father and son relationship working together?
It's been really good overall. That can be difficult at times just because of the close nature of our working relationship, and then having the father-son aspect to it. I am, I'm sure, a lot more critical than he would like me to be, but he also knows, not all the time, but in certain cases, but he also knows that I mean it because I want it to be best for him.
Yeah.
I'm coming from a generation that is completely different than his, so I'm coming in with different, whether it's, fitness suggestions or dietary changes or just lifestyle hacks, that we can get. And so it's like a blessing and a curse where sometimes I'm very frustrated with him, but other times I feel, and overall, I just feel so lucky to be able to work so closely with him, considering he is one of a dying breed of those craftsmen from back in the day. And he's also done every stage of the board building process too. He was not just a shaper. And so, we may have different opinions. He's so good at, like I said earlier, giving me my autonomy and letting me make the decision, and he trusts me with it because the proof has been in the pudding. And so he'll have suggestions, though, that I realize I overlooked too. And so I'm still learning stuff from him, and I'll see things and be like, well, why are you doing it like that? Why don't you do it like this? And I'll do it my way. And then 2 steps later, it'd be like, oh, that's why you do it the first way. It's the repetition, it's the experience that he has. And I think it's drawn us closer for sure. You know, my mom passed away in 2016, and that was kind of a big wake-up call. Like, what kind of, you know, I only got one parent left. They were huge, they have been huge influences in my life, and so just cherish the, you know, the frustration and the joy with him. And yeah, we're just little peas in a pod that sometimes don't get along, but most of the time we gel really well. You know, we have very similar opinions and views on things, and we're learning from each other. I know he's learning from me, and I'm definitely learning from him. I have always been learning from him. So it's been really rewarding.
It's great to see.
Yeah.
I mean, Scott, it's come up a couple times on the podcast with Scott where it's like father and son board building combos, you know, and you try to name them. There's a handful, but it's great to see the brand the legacy being continued. There's not a lot of 50-year-old board brands at this point.
Yeah.
And there are very, very few who are continuing to iterate and improve and not just live off the legacy and do new things and do better things and push the envelope. So you guys are one of very few.
Well, thank you. And I have to hand it to my dad. From when I started working with him and introducing him to the Leaf Lite idea, and then even looking back in retrospect, he was at the forefront of a lot of the innovative surfboard designs when it comes to tow boards. The strapped crew was a huge influence, and he worked right with them, and they really spawned. You know, they were doing the first foil boarding. They were doing the first stand-up paddling. You know, they were doing the first kite boarding, windsurfing. Like, they were pushing it to the next level, big wave stuff. And I got to hand it to my dad. Excuse me. He's an old dog who can learn new tricks. I came to him with the idea of introducing alternative materials and really giving it a go. He didn't bat an eye. He said, sounds great. Let's do it, you know? And I know that's carried through from his previous experiences. And so he's helps me keep pushing the iteration and innovation.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really awesome to see. Any success that comes your guys' way at this point is hard-earned, well-deserved, and you guys, yeah, if you guys have 1 million Instagram followers and you're selling 100,000 boards a year, you earned it. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. No, thank you. And just one point on that. I purposely, by default, I have to be in the videos, but I purposely do not try to not put myself in front of the camera in the limelight. I want my dad to have as much credit as he can get because he deserves it all.
Yeah. Growing
up, watching him talking about how hard he's worked, there's been a lot of incidences where he seems to have been overlooked. And so I just want him to get his shine. He's an incredible craftsman, and when people like that are gone, they're gone.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to help document some of him and some of his ability, and then also just perpetuate it.
All of that is true. Like, we need to hear more of him from the craftsman part, but I just want to hear more of his stories. Like, we got to get him back on the podcast. No board building at all. Just tell me stories from the early days.
He has incredible stories, and he'd be happy to come back and talk with you about stuff either on or off the mic. But we're also working on something to get his stories out there as well. So
perfect.
Yeah, we're really excited actually for what's coming.
Whether or not we wait until that comes to fruition, once you guys have them at least collected, maybe we do a podcast at that point and just go story time.
Absolutely.
As you know, we have a watch sponsor on the show, Veyer Watches. They sent you a gift.
Oh, wow.
All the way down to El Salvador.
No way.
Yep. They wanted you to have this.
That is rad.
VAER, VeyerWatches.com. You should have given it to you at the beginning of the trip because you could wear it in the ocean the whole time.
Man.
Waterproof, guaranteed, assembled in America.
Oh.
and stylish.
That is
too.
beautiful.
Isn't it?
That's beautiful. I don't know if this camera can
yeah.
see it, but
Veyer watches, and then we have
it's incredible.
a landing page where listeners can get 15% off if they want, but VeyerWatches.com/Surf Splendor.
Don't forget the /Surf Splendor.
Don't forget it.
This thing's beautiful.
off. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of
Thank you,
course.
Veyer.
Of course.
Wow.
Yeah, they're heavily invested. Like they've been listening to the podcast for years and years and years. And
Incredible.
So, yeah, they're super cool dudes.
What a nice box too. This is like out of a Tiffany's like store or something.
Well, you can reuse it.
Yeah.
Put
I would
something else in
definitely
there.
like this is going to go in my drawer with something else in it probably, but
Yeah, exactly.
lovely. Thank you, Veyer. Thank you, Surf Splendor.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome. All right, we'll give away the board at the end of the month. We didn't mention it, but the reason that we started doing these Maui Leaf Light giveaways in April was your idea, because Earth Day is in April.
That's right. Earth Day is in April, and I think it's just a great opportunity to remind people that we live on this finite resource of a planet. And most of the time we, in society and definitely economically, we act like it's infinite, but it's not. So just bringing a little awareness to the earth, and when we give the earth love, it gives us love. And that's kind of that was the whole theme with, I think, doing it in April, and seems fitting.
Cool. Excited to do it. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, David.
Final question. When can you surf again based on your doctor's diagnosis?
It sounds like it's a little up to me, but I'm going to probably give it a good week.
That's it?
No, I mean, well, I'll assess it at a week, right?
Okay.
Like I'll see where I'm at. It seems to be like the healing process, according to them, is only going to take, about a week. That's when all the sutures are going to start to dissolve
Wow.
and the glue is going to come off. I'll probably take care of it just because it's on my face. I don't want to just dive right back into the water. I'd like for it to be as small as possible, even though I don't have a modeling career.
I just can't believe the gore that I saw yesterday to if you're surfing again within a week, that blows my mind.
Yeah.
But that's great.
Yeah, I mean, modern medicine, amazing.
Shocking.
Shocking.
All right. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
All right.
Surf Splendor.